Today, I would like to discuss the topic of how gender is represented in the media. I will be examining some commonly used stereotypes of males and females in movie and television characters. I will look into some of the ways in which women are excluded from the news media. I will explain how these stereotypes and areas of exclusion affect the gender pay gap, gender violence, and what other social institutions are correlated to unequal gender representation in the media. Sometimes we fail to realize how much of our perspective is actually someone else's. What I mean by this is that there is a commonly accepted understanding in society of what is normal and what is other. This standard relies on the acceptance of the white, male, able body, and deems all bodies that lie outside of that norm to be different, other, unacceptable, unfortunate, and even grotesque. So what does this have to do with media? Well, for one thing, looking through the lens of the typical white male, society has created an endless supply of female characters that are victims, weak, silent, or bitchy. Looking to history for some context, feminine qualities have long been deemed undesirable by men. Vulnerability, communication, and emotional connection have been skewed through the male gaze to be weak, annoying, frail, small, and untrustworthy. We have learned in this class how women have been dehumanized and objectified under a patriarchal society structure, and those social bounds transpire across the small and big screens. When we see these photographs of typical female characters, what are we actually seeing? There is the commonality of the attractive, thin, white female. There are women as corpses or actively being threatened. Not to forget the ever-popular black housekeeper or slave image that sometimes feels like the only way black women get to show up on screen. What do the frequency of these images teach to women and girls in society? People contain multitudes of characteristics. Even the most stoic cowboy cares about his horse. Superheroes care about their communities and their families. But what else do superheroes do? They use physical violence to solve problems, as do many male characters in TV and movies. The rough and brusque male tropes show men that in order to be masculine, they must prohibit emotional experiences and lean towards stoicism instead of vulnerability. Labeling qualities as inherently masculine and only for boys versus feminine characteristics that only girls and women possess is especially destructive to society as a whole. It tells women that they should not have pride, control, power, or dominance, while telling men that they cannot express their emotions, reach out for help, feel sadness openly, or explore their sexuality. Barring such important characteristics of humanity from particular genders creates consequences that reverberate through society and are incredibly hard to change. Women have not been welcomed in certain male-dominated sectors in society, like political leadership and finance, while men remain the victims of the highest suicide rates and depression, which usually goes untreated. There are definitely some influential feminist movements and theories that aim to advance the social and cultural agenda of equal representation. Sticking with the theme of media, we can look to intersectionality, Black and Chicana feminist movements, as well as social constructionism for the heaviest hands. Intersectionality came along after second-wave feminism and is strongly tied to Black feminism and fourth-wave feminism. Intersectionality views social, economic, racial, and gender systems of inequality as all influencing why and how we exist. This perspective sees that we are all products of many different factors coming together to shape our experiences beyond one shared identity. This is a vital perspective to utilize in the media, where varying viewpoints of race and gender are often lacking or cut down to be more palatable for the generalized viewer. The Black feminist movement was a response in a lot of ways to the overly whitewashed second wave, which I will discuss further in the next segment. Black women began their own rights movement so that they could focus on more pressing issues in their own communities, such as violence against women, reproductive rights, gender-based issues, and support for and by each other without feeling isolated by the larger feminist movement of the time. Social constructionism offers an explanation for how social norms, like gender differences, are actually taught and not inherent at birth. This liberal feminist perspective suggests that gender constructs can be changed over time, since they are not of biological origin. Social constructionism and standpoint theory offer alternative perspectives of society that are more inclusive to the multitudes of human conditions and experiences. When we incorporate these theories into the media, we can create a deeper understanding of ourselves and the people around us. These theories go beyond just male and female gender inequities, but also include more diverse gender awareness and what really exists within ourselves when we remove the veil of essentialism. Referencing our textbook Through Women's Eyes, many Northern women had fought for the end of slavery, so in the memorable words of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, would it not be advisable, when the constitutional door is open, for women to avail ourselves of the strong arm and blue uniform of the black soldier, to walk in by his side? Unfortunately, members of Congress argued that pairing women's suffrage and black suffrage would disrupt the black rights momentum, which was their priority at the time. They even went so far as to include in the second section of the 14th Amendment that states granting voting rights to former slaves only applied to men 21 years old and up. While some moments of women of color and white women working towards equality together have been documented, they are few and far between until more recent times. The white feminists of the early to mid-20th century may have learned that inclusion makes their destination a more difficult one to reach. It is no wonder that currently there are far more opportunities for white women in the media than women of color. This is not only feminist history, but American history. Exclusion of women of color and minorities may make a more convincing argument for a Southern congressman in the early 1900s, but today we need more representation of all people to welcome in a new era of equality. Only 1 in 5 of black leading ladies from the past decade have a dark skin tone. Most black leading women from popular films in the past decade are depicted with hairstyles that conform to European standards of beauty, as opposed to natural black hairstyles. According to the African American Policy Forum, representation of black women in media is disproportionately sparse, and when it does happen, it is often a regurgitation of negative stereotypes. The truth is that women who appeal to conventional beauty standards are afforded more privileges in society. So far, we've discussed how common gender stereotypes have been exhausted in film and television. Let's talk a little now about how women are excluded from broadcast news. Only 37% of stories told on the news are reported by women. This means that more often than not, we are told important information about the world around us by men, which fits perfectly into the aforementioned masculine tropes of power and leadership. Since men have been taught by society that much of their worth comes from being able to protect those weaker than themselves, it makes sense that society in general would accept hearing men tell them what is happening in the world for that ingrained feeling of safety. Women, however, while valued for their nurturing and caring traits, do not have the respect of society to inform them of the stressful and difficult topics that the news generally includes, because we are also seen as irrational, illogical, and untrustworthy. This also influences how seldomly women are included as experts in particular areas being reported on. Although there are female economists, political analysts, social advocates, scientists, and more, we are wildly unaccustomed to seeing them in a publicly broadcast arena where they might execute their skills. 81% of experts utilized in news reports are men, which leaves a huge gap in equality of not only the anchors who report the news, but the professionals behind many important stories. A recent report was released that focused on the whiteness of the New York Times staff. Of all the departments in the news organization, the staff with the most diversity was the news assistants, who mostly do administrative jobs and get paid the least. As far as intersectionality is concerned, these failures in gender and racial diversity are inextricably bound.
If I may be so honored to have all the female nominees in every category stand with me in this room tonight. The actors, Meryl, if you do it, everybody else will, come on. The filmmakers, the producers, the directors, the writers, the cinematographer, the composers, the songwriters, the designers. Come on. Ms. Bohnet. Okay, look around, everybody. Look around, ladies and gentlemen, because we all have stories to tell and projects we need finance. Don't talk to us about it at the parties tonight. Invite us into your office in a couple days, or you can come to ours, whichever suits you best, and we'll tell you all about them. I have 2 words to leave with you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Inclusion rider.
Inclusion rider. This statement left a lot of people scratching their heads after Frances McDormand's 2018 Oscar speech. The inclusion rider is an attachment to a film or television contract which delineates that the project's production team must take steps to seek out and hire cast and crew members from historically underrepresented backgrounds. One study found that in Hollywood, 1/3 or 33% of speaking characters were female, despite the fact that women represent just over half the population in America. 28.3% of characters with dialogue were from non-white racial or ethnic groups, though such groups are nearly 40% of the U.S. population. 3.4% of film directors were female, and only 7% of films had a cast whose balance of race and ethnicity reflected the country's diversity. In broadcast TV, 17% of directors were female, and 19% of programs were ethnically balanced. The film industry still functions as a straight, white boys' club, the study states. It also states that we're seeing across the landscape an erasure of certain groups: women, people of color, the LGBT community. This is really an epidemic of invisibility that points to a lack of inclusivity across film and TV. In 2017, a comparison of the highest paid male and female actors revealed an average salary of $57.4 million for men and $21.8 million for women. That means that the top female actors earn 38% as much as the top male actors. According to Forbes, the top 10 highest paid actresses in 2018 earn less than 30 cents for every dollar earned by their male counterparts. These actresses brought in a combined salary of $186 million, while the 10 highest paid men earned $748.5 million. To quote Charlize Theron after a successful renegotiation of her contract to match her male co-star's salary, she states that, "We just need to put our foot down. This is a good time for us to bring this to a place of fairness, and girls need to know that being a feminist is a good thing. It doesn't mean that you hate men, it means equal rights. If you're doing the same job, you should be compensated and treated in the same way." How does this all come together? Women across the media are widely underrepresented, underpaid, shown as socially harmful stereotypes, and they are not the only ones. Intersectionality teaches us that forces outside of our control shape our experiences in the world. Social constructionism tells us that we create the constructs that society follows, even the ones that limit us. If we create that, however, we can also dismantle it. The greatest motivators for selling gender roles are capitalism and patriarchy. Under the capitalistic control of the US, girls and boys are sold increasingly different toys, clothes, entertainment, and expectations. The patriarchal social structure serves to enforce particular gender roles, such as women's domesticity and men's power in and out of the home. When combined, capitalism and patriarchy can have devastating consequences for children and adults alike. The emphasis on individual gender conformity can limit children in how and what they learn, such as keeping girls out of science and boys out of emotional processing. These restrictions carry into the adult world of the labor market, where gender differences can be used to enforce occupational segregation and keep women out of particularly lucrative employment opportunities. This is all to say that the insistence of gender disparities serves only those in power who can profit off of the privilege that they were born with. However, even for those with privilege, deeming certain things like communication and emotional connection as inherently feminine can cut them off from experiencing a more vulnerable and connected existence.
What I know for sure is that speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have. And I'm especially proud and inspired by all the women who have felt strong enough and empowered enough to speak up and share their personal stories. Each of us in this room are celebrated because of the stories that we tell. And this year, we became the story.